Now, there's quite a few different ways you can do this. I've done many of these. One of the big things we used was just a local library. They usually have conference rooms or what they call meeting rooms. And the mastermind group that I did in Salt Lake, we actually went to the library every time and just used one of their free meeting rooms. You can also use somebody else's office. If somebody has an office or office space that you could use, you could do that. Somebody's home. You could also rent a conference room and then everybody divides the cost. And, one thing to do is definitely avoid bars or restaurants or places that are noisy. And it's interesting because I've been going to, like I said, a lot of these little meetup groups and stuff. And there's been a couple of restaurants that's quiet enough to hear, but a lot of times, especially if it's kind of hip or a happening place, you can barely hear and everybody's leaning in. It's best to just completely stay away from that. And one thing that I just started doing is I actually have a mastermind group now where we play Frisbee golf.
Nice.
That's where we do it. And this started because with a friend, Social Rob, and Try Swim Coach, that's their Twitter names. We were actually just playing and this Frisbee golf for the first time for me just a couple of weeks ago. And the entire time we were playing, we were talking about internet marketing. So I just kind of said, hey, why don't we make a mastermind group and then just add another couple of members from time to time? And it worked out great. Everybody was excited about it. And as opposed to when we're sitting in the library, when I did that, we've all got notepads and that's more of a formal setting. But nowadays, we just all whipped out our iPhones and stuff when somebody said a site that we didn't know about. And we just really quickly, I'll just do a jot to myself and take care of it that way. And then we can still play and have a good time all at the same time. So, finding a meeting spot that works for you and might even be fun, that's just a high suggestion for you.
Yeah, we went to the mastermind group last week in Salt Lake, the one you'd been a part of, and it was at that library. And actually, I've been to that same library and when we had when I was a president of the real estate investing group, when you met me, that's where we'd have our board meetings for our real estate investing group. And as long as you weren't like charging money or trying to sell anything there, those conference rooms were free. And, they're pretty nice conference rooms with whiteboards and you can easily fit 8 people in there around a table. And so definitely, ask your local library if they have such a thing, because there's a good chance that there is. And that's a really handy way to do that kind of a thing. All right, number 3 is, set some ground rules. And this may be something once you found the initial, group of people, the 2 or 3 or 4, however many people you want to start with, once you're ready to get going, you want to, and probably this will be what you do in the first meeting, but you want to at first just talk about, well, what are the ground rules? How are we going to conduct this thing? What are some of the different, things that are going to determine how we go about this mastermind meeting? And so here's a number of things you want to consider. The first thing you want to consider is just ask yourself, well, what is going to be expected as being part of this mastermind group?
Yeah, and in one that I've been in, one of the things that was expected is that you need to be at all the meetings, because what we found in other groups is sometimes people would just be there when they would present and ask for help, and then the next time somebody else would present and they wouldn't be there, and that's just not fair to anybody. So that's just one of those examples of what is going to be expected of the group. And also, you also want to, be on time, all this kind of stuff, but just let everybody know that this is actually how it's going to be. So people aren't just showing up whenever they want. That's a little harder to do there, but at least you can put it out and say, this is what is expected if you're going to be a member of this group.
Yeah, all those are great considerations. What's expected when it comes to showing up, to being on time. How if things happen, so maybe you have a ground rule of like, well, yeah, sure, if you have to, miss one every few months, fine. But have that all laid out so people know that that's going to be the case up front. Because if those become problems later and it wasn't laid out, it's a lot harder to take care of those things after the fact. And of course, another thing you want to decide is how often are you going to meet? Is it going to be weekly? Is it going to be every other week? Is it going to be monthly? And of course, what we suggested is, what's most effective is to try to at least do monthly if you can, and if it makes sense, do even a little bit more than that.
Yeah, I think it depends. You'll see right away. You can just put something out there at first, like once a month, just to get it rolling, but you'll start seeing what kind of value you get get from it. So for instance, in Salt Lake, we started meeting every 3 weeks because we were getting so much value. We didn't want to just meet once a month. And actually here in San Diego, we're going to do it every 2 weeks because the entire time we were just constantly helping each other at a completely different level. So you just have to kind of feel it out and see, what kind of value you're getting from the group.
So another thing you want to decide is how, I guess we already kind of talked about this, how is somebody going to be accepted into the group? If you have an initial group of people, maybe, and we've kind of already talked about this point quite a bit, but at that point, if you do have like an initial handful of people, you might just want to say, okay, we've got 3 people now, or we've got 4 or 5, and, what's the max we want to have and how are we going to accept new people? But we kind of already talked about that. Then the next thing is, we've talked about you want to have expectations and ground rules and things like that. Well, how are you going to enforce this thing? And, I actually heard some pretty creative ways about, sometimes there does need to be a little bit of motivation for people to stick to the ground rules so they take it seriously because, want it to be valuable for everyone. So some of the creative things I've heard of is that, for instance, if you're late so many times or if you miss a meeting, you have to pay a certain amount to a charity, for instance. Or, there's the obvious risk of possibly so many strikes and you're out. Unfortunately, we got to remove you from the group because you never come or whatever the case may be. And so again, just decide beforehand, how are you going to enforce the ground rules and the things that you've set up?
Yeah, we actually thought about, paying dues once a year, but then we were kind of talking about a lot of the guys in the one group I was in, they were making enough money that anything like a fine or any of that stuff wouldn't be enough of an incentive for them to be there if they weren't going to anyway.
Yeah.
Or even if they paid $300 a year, they're like, well, I can't be there, so I'm just not going to be there.
Yeah.
That it doesn't feel like they're losing anything from that.
Yeah.
But basically what we did, there were a couple of people we kind of let go from the group, and really it was pretty light. There's sometimes when we didn't get together every 3 weeks. So this particular month we were all just busy, and then the next month we were actually busy. And what ends up happening is you can just very lightly let the person go, like they're off the email list. They just don't get the emails for coming. We did that one time for somebody because we hadn't gotten together for a while, and then we just kind of stopped sending emails. So, let them off easy.
Yep. Another thing to decide is obviously how long are the meetings going to be. Usually I think it's good for everyone to know what to expect. Everybody, it's going to be a valuable experience for everybody, but people should know it's like, okay, this is going to be a 2-hour block. And then I know I can, go back and I've got my other work to get back to and stuff. So, if you want people to take it seriously, you definitely want to outline that beforehand so people know what to expect and, don't come and then sometimes it's an hour and a half, sometimes it goes 3 hours. And so, that you want to respect everybody's time and set a guideline there as well.